That absolutely guarantees you a wonderful, over-the-top introduction, which I'm honored to hear. But Wing is also a dear friend. We know each other for over 20 years. We've in fact worked together on almost every project that you've seen Disney produce in parks and resorts over the last 20 years, and it's my privilege and honor to work with him. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the influences of the increasing opening of mainland China on tourism here and around the world, but also on the inflow of tourism into China, and most importantly, the role that Disney is playing in that and how we see that unfolding. Wing told me today, and I heard Stuart say that there are about 350 people here at lunch today. Well, imagine next year there were 700 people at lunch, but the people who came to lunch, the new people, the new 350, liked long tables, not round tables, and really high chairs and really high tables. Well, Stuart would kind of wonder, well, how are we going to accommodate those people? Imagine 2 years from now, there were 1,500 people at this lunch, and all of those new people liked those long tables, round tables. And 10 years from now, this lunch was 3,000 and not 350. Well, I guarantee that over time, this lunch would change in character based on the interests and desires of all those people, new people. And in fact, that is a bit of a microcosm of what's happening in the world of travel today, specifically related to new travelers from mainland China. Today, there are about 10 million travelers that leave mainland China every year and are starting to travel around the world. Of course, as you heard the mayor say, many come to North America, are interested in that. But in a short decade from now, that graphic will look like this. There will be over 100 million travelers leaving mainland China for parts unknown. Of course, lots of them are going to start in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, in Macau, in Southeast Asia, closer to home, but many, many are going to find their way elsewhere around the world, to Europe, to North America, right to our own cities, right here to Los Angeles, as the mayor said. And it is absolutely impossible for us not to change the way we think about welcoming people, the way we think about the interests and tastes of these new travelers from mainland China, many of whom have had a very different last 50 years than we've had. And I'm going to come back to that as it relates specifically to Disney. When we think about today, both inbound and outbound travel to China, I mentioned, and you can see on the bottom, on the right side in the green, there are about 10 million outbound today, and we think 100 million by 2015. But inbound travel to mainland China will also vastly increase. This year, Wing mentioned that we have a business of touring people called Adventures by Disney. We put a trip to mainland China on our itinerary for the first time this year, and it sold out in record time. People are fascinated with the idea of travel within a vast, beautiful country that they have not been able to see. And in fact, it is very likely that mainland China will become the #1 international destination over the next 10 or 15 years for travelers around the world. So very, very interesting for us in the travel and tourism business. Of course, travel is an incredible bridge. You're talking about bridges in this conference, an incredible bridge to people around the world and between people. What's going on today in China, interestingly for Disney, is very, very reminiscent of what Walt Disney saw in the 1950s in the United States. Firstly, new mass form of media for reaching people with ideas. Of course, in the 1950s, it was television. Walt was the only movie producer that embraced television in the early days. And today, it's the internet. People in mainland China are absolutely inundated with information about their own country and about the world on the internet. Secondly, the interstate system in the U.S. in the post-war period had been completed. Automobiles were widely available again, and people could find a reasonable and cheap and mass way of traveling. Well, of course, in China today, The explosion in the airline industry is allowing people to travel more cheaply and more easily, just as it was in the 1950s United States. The amount of money and infrastructure being spent on airports, if any of you have been there, is amazing. And of course, Walt had what I've tried to capture there is animated movies, The Wonderful World of Disney on television, merchandise that was everywhere, and the opening of Disneyland in 1955 to bring Disney magic to people, to bring the franchise. And of course, today, the situation is similar for us with the opening of Hong Kong Disneyland, depicted by Mickey in his Vera Wang designed outfit. The internet, movies that we both show that are made here in the U.S., and most importantly, movies that are being co-produced with Chinese studios in the mainland. So the situation to me is very reminiscent, and I think as a company, we see the same kind of opportunity and growth in China as Walt envisioned here in the U.S. In fact, interestingly, while Hong Kong Disneyland was under construction, which was only 3 or 4 years ago, and we had negotiated our deal, initially, it was only 1 or 2 state-sponsored travel agencies that would allow groups to book travel to Hong Kong and outside of mainland China. By the time we opened, there were almost 650 state-sponsored travel agents now taking individuals and allowing individuals to get visa and facilitating their travel outside of the mainland. Today, there are over 1,000 state-sponsored travel agencies doing this. So even in the facility and access and infrastructure, mainland China continues to grow very, very quickly. When we first started talking to the Hong Kong government and signed our deal in 1999, there were about 10 million visitors into Hong Kong, half of which were from the mainland. This year, there'll probably be 28 million visitors into Hong Kong, 20 million of which will be from the mainland. So this is an area of incredible explosion, 9% increase just last year alone. And today, there are 144 airports in China with more than 90 new ones planned over the next decade. And those of you who have traveled in China know that the airports are modern, 21st century, vast, in expectation of vast numbers of people, and are very, very professional in expediting people through. Obviously, the U.S. Will want to compete heavily with other places around the world, other destinations around the world for this amazingly burgeoning growth of a Chinese middle class that has finally started to be able to contemplate travel. And by the way, sometimes in talking to my colleagues, and they see income levels in U.S. dollar equivalents of 6,000 average family income in a city like Shanghai, or 10,000, they can't imagine that people are contemplating travel at those level of income. But in fact, they are. And in fact, the savings rate in China, I don't have to lecture the choir here, is huge. People have the money to travel. They're just waiting for the ability and the ease of which travel is such an important factors. The mayor mentioned that lots and lots of Chinese are interested in visiting the U.S., and I can tell you that statistically he is absolutely right. Of a recent survey that we did of 7,000 mainland Chinese citizens, the U.S. was far and away the most desired destination for their first international travel. When I say international, I mean beyond Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, was their #1 destination of interest. And it is things. He didn't mention Las Vegas. I wouldn't if I were the mayor of Los Angeles either. But Las Vegas is also one of the most interesting places, in addition to Disneyland, for Chinese travelers to come. Of course, he and others in the government have been instrumental in the signing of an MOU recently, I'm sure you all know, with Beijing, to not quite get to the level of approved destination status, but for all intents and purposes, to be very close to the approved destination status for the U.S. And this is what is going to contribute, starting this fall, with a huge amount of outgrowth. And my concern, I will tell you, and I do have one,